The night smelled like iron and rain. Rhea Calder pressed a palm to the saloon door and listened. Boot heels, low voices, a piano holding one last note. She had sworn to wait. She had sworn to hate. She had sworn to keep her brother's grave quiet until the law rose up. The law did not come. The desert kept its silence. So Rhea came to Gallow Ridge with a pistol under her skirt and a pearl ring at her throat. The ring was her mother's. The pistol was her own. The door swung and the room turned its head. Smoke, whiskey, thunder beyond the eaves. A dealer slid cards. A lantern trembled. By the window, a man watched rain crawl down the glass like a slow river. Asher Holt, outlaw by rumor, hired gun when there was nothing else. She had learned his name like a prayer she would never say aloud. His hat brim shadowed his brow. He did not look at her until he did, and the room loosened around that glance. Not handsome, not kind. Eyes like dark water before dawn. Her vows went quiet, like a church with its candles blown out. She walked to the bar and set a coin down for coffee. "No coffee after sundown, miss," the barkeep said. "Whiskey comes easier. Water if you want it clean." "Water," she said. Behind her, the piano found a hymn and broke it on purpose. Some men like to ruin what is gentle. Rhea kept her hands steady. She watched Asher in the window glass instead of turning. This was the face that walked her sleep. This was the mouth that might have ordered the bullet that took Daniel. She had promised not to shake. She did not shake. But the earth inside her moved. A chair scraped. Leather creaked. When she blinked, he was beside her, a small space between them, like a held breath. "Long ride," he said. "Storms all day near Split Mesa." She nodded. The rain grew harder. He tapped the bar. His knuckles were nicked, healed over, nicked again. "Road work. You from here?" he asked. "No," she said. "Passing through." He looked at her hands, at the pearl ring, at the cup she had not touched. "You look like the kind who belongs to quiet places," he said, "not to rooms like this." "I go where I must," she said. For a breath he smiled, just a mark of noticing. The barkeep drifted away. Rhea finally sipped the water. "There is a man I am meant to find," she said. She had not planned to speak it, but the words stood between them. "Who is that?" he asked. "A man who takes what is not his, a man who calls a sin a day's wage. That describes a few of us," he said. "It does," she said, "but only one of you has his name." Silence sat with them. The lantern hissed. Outside, thunder rolled. They looked like two people talking about weather. They looked like a man too tired to lie and a woman too tired to wait. What he did not know was this: her pistol was not loaded. She had left the bullets in a tin on the kitchen table 3 towns back. She did not trust her hand in the dark. If she killed him, she would live in that hour forever. If she spoke to him, she might find the truth. One would ruin her body. One might ruin her faith. She chose a smaller ruin. So she asked a foolish question. "Do you ever wake to find mud on your boots when you know your floor was clean? Do you ever smell gun smoke when no gun was fired?" Asher watched her. "Sometimes," he said. "Sometimes A man carries a road into his home without meaning to. Sometimes a road carries him where he did not mean to go. She studied the water. Her brother's grave lay somewhere behind her, far from this lamp and wood. She had no right to want the sound of this man's voice again. She wanted it anyway. A woman laughed near the stairs. Music climbed and fell. Rhea let herself look at him without glass. "Tell me your name," she said. "You ask without offering," he said. "Rhea." He nodded. "Asher." The name moved through her like a slow fire, but then she whispered a line she had not planned. "You were near a ranch north of Dawson Springs in late spring, were you not?" He did not look away. "I am near many places. I leave few footprints that stay." Doubt opened like a crack in dry clay. What if the story she had built was scaffolding for grief? What if she had named the wrong ghost? He finished his drink and set the glass upside down. He did not touch her. "Be careful where you look for debt, Rhea," he said. "Some men will hand you the bill and let you pay with your soul." "I am not afraid to pay," she said. "I am afraid of the wrong price." He stepped back. The space between them filled with lamplight. "There is a livery behind the church," he said. "Horse named Bristle. If a man without a face follows you, take her and ride the wash south. There is a stand of cottonwoods where the storm quits early." "Wait there." "Why would you help me?" she asked. "Because someone once waited for me in a storm, and I owe the sky a debt," he said. He turned and walked to the door. The rain would wash his tracks. Her vows felt thin as paper. Asher touched the brim to her, a gesture like breath. Rhea watched him step into the night that smelled of iron and rain. If this story has warmed a corner of your heart, stay close. There is more to hear. Night is not done, and neither are we. The rain didn't stop. It only softened, like a promise it didn't mean to keep. Rhea waited inside the saloon long after Asher had gone. The lanterns were burning low, their light trembling across the warped floorboards. The barkeep stacked chairs upside down, and the piano player had fallen asleep with his hat over his eyes. Only the storm kept singing. She traced the rim of her glass, thinking of his voice, that low, quiet steadiness. Not charm, something older, something earned through loss. She should have left town. She knew that. Her plan had been clean. Find the man, draw his name from the dust, end what he started. But the truth had come wrapped in confusion, and Asher Holt's eyes. They had unstitched every thread she'd pulled tight since Daniel's death. By the time she stepped outside, the sky was a bruise. The street ran dark with mud, the signs on every building slick with rain. She lifted her shawl and walked toward the church, her boots sinking in the earth. The livery stood quiet behind it, just as Asher said. A white mare waited there, head bowed, tail heavy with water. Bristle. Rhea ran a hand along the horse's flank. Warm, solid, real, something she could still trust. She whispered, "He told me to find you." The mare turned her head, slow, patient, like she'd heard the voice of that man before. Rhea should have been angry. Instead, she felt something close to calm. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the strange mercy in his warning. She found an old oil lamp by the wall, struck a match, and let the light catch on the shadows. A saddle rested nearby, and beside it, footprints, fresh. Someone else had been here. The match burned to her fingers. She dropped it, and then a click. the unmistakable metallic whisper of a revolver being drawn behind her. "Step real slow," a voice said. "Hands where I can see 'em." It wasn't Asher's voice. Too young, too loud, the kind of voice that wanted to sound dangerous because it didn't know how to be. She raised her hands. "You don't want this." "I think I do," he said. "You were talking to Holt. I saw you." Her heart thudded once, then went very still. So it was true. Asher wasn't just a name. He was hunted. "Where is he?" the boy demanded. "He's worth more than the preacher's church and the graveyard put together." She turned slowly. He couldn't have been more than 20. Mud on his boots, rain on his face, a bounty hunter chasing ghosts. "You won't find him," she said softly. "Then maybe I start with you." "You looked close enough." Rhea studied him, her pulse cold. The revolver in his hand shook slightly. Fear, not hunger, drove him. She'd seen it before, in her own reflection. "Put it down," she said. "Don't—" Lightning split the sky, and through the flash she saw another figure behind the boy, silent, unmoving, part of the night itself. Asher. He stepped forward, calm as sunrise. The boy didn't even hear him until the barrel of Asher's Colt touched his wrist. "Let it go, son," Asher said, quiet and steady. "You fire that thing here, and the storm won't be the only noise this town hears." The boy's breath hitched. The gun slipped from his hand. Rhea didn't move. She couldn't. Asher's coat was soaked through. Rain dripped from the brim of his hat. But his eyes, those same dark water eyes, held her, not the boy. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "You told me to come," she answered. He almost smiled, but it never reached his mouth. "Not tonight. Not with a bounty at my back." She looked at the boy, now trembling, his fear turning to shame. "What will you do with him?" "Let him run," Asher said. "He ain't my enemy, just another fool trying to eat." The boy hesitated. "You're Asher Holt." "Names don't matter," Asher said. "Only what they make you carry." The boy stared at Rhea, then back at him. "They said you killed a man out near Dawson Springs." Rhea's chest tightened. "Daniel." Asher's jaw flexed. "They say many things." "But did you?" she whispered. He looked at her, steady, unflinching. "Would it matter if I said no?" "It might," she said. "It might change everything." He nodded once, like a man who'd heard that kind of hope before and learned not to trust it. Then he looked to the boy. "Go," Asher said, "and tell whoever sent you that ghosts don't pay bounties." The boy ran into the rain, gun forgotten in the mud. Silence again. Just the steady heartbeat of the storm. Rhea turned back to Asher. "You saved me," she said. "No," he said softly. "I just didn't want you to bleed on my conscience tonight." But the way he looked at her told a different truth. The kind of truth that crept under vows and promises and made them tremble. She stepped closer, close enough to see the rain catch on his lashes. "Why are you still here, Asher?" she asked. "Why not run?" His answer came like thunder rolled low. "Because I'm tired of running from what I can't forget." Her breath caught. "And what's that?" He studied her face, as if searching for something he'd already lost once before. "You," he said. The lamp flickered. The rain slowed. Rhea didn't speak. She couldn't. Somewhere deep in her chest, the ground shifted. Hate had been her anchor, but now it felt like sand. Asher turned toward the open door. "Get some rest, Rhea," he said. "Tomorrow the road gets mean again." He stepped out into the wet silence. She watched him fade into it, part of the storm, part of the night she couldn't leave behind, and when she finally closed her eyes, she wasn't sure which was louder, her heartbeat or his name. If this story has stirred something quiet inside you, don't look away just yet. The wind still carries their voices. The dawn hasn't broken, and neither has what's between them. Dawn crept slow over Gallow Ridge, washing the mud streets in silver light. The rain had stopped, but the air still held its taste, wet iron, wet wood, and the faint smoke of something burning far off. Rhea sat by the small window of the room she'd rented above the mercantile. Her shawl hung over a chair, her revolver on the table beside a single candle that had burned to wax and wick. She hadn't slept. Not really. Asher Holt's voice lived in the hours between dreams. The way he said you, like a confession instead of a word, had followed her into the grey. She told herself it meant nothing. Men said things under rain they didn't mean under daylight, but she couldn't stop hearing it. Below, a wagon rattled over puddles. The world moved on. Only she stayed still. When she finally rose, her hands were steady again. She dressed plain, braided her hair, and tucked the empty revolver beneath her coat. A woman could face the truth better when her hands felt full. By mid-morning, the saloon had woken to life. Smoke, laughter, clinking glass. The piano man was playing again, same broken hymn, a little faster now. Rhea crossed the street toward the church instead. Its white paint was peeling, its bell cracked down one side. The door stood open, and inside, the preacher was sweeping dust into a slow circle. He was old, with a face like sun-bleached parchment, and eyes too kind for this place. "Morning, miss," he said. "You looking for service or shelter?" "Neither," she said. "I'm looking for a man." He smiled a little. "Ain't we all?" She hesitated. "He might have come through here last night. Name's Asher Holt." The broom stopped mid-sweep. "That name brings weather, miss. The kind that doesn't pass easy." "I just need to know the truth," she said. The preacher leaned on his broom. "Truth's a slippery horse. You hold too tight and it'll throw you." "I'm not afraid of falling." He studied her, then nodded toward the far pew. "He was here early, before sunup. Left something behind." Rhea crossed the quiet aisle. On the bench lay a folded scrap of paper, weighed down by a single bullet. Her throat tightened as she lifted it. 2 words, written in a rough hand. "For Faith." The bullet shone dully in the light. Not loaded, not fired. A promise, or an apology. "Did he say where he was going?" she asked. The preacher shook his head. "Only said some debts can't be paid in coin." Then he rode west. West. Toward Dawson Springs. Toward her brother's grave. The world seemed to narrow around her breath. "Thank you," she whispered. As she turned to leave, the preacher spoke again. "Miss Calder, you ride with anger in your pocket. It'll bite through the cloth before you reach the next town." She paused at the door. "Then I suppose I'll learn how deep it bites." Outside, the light had sharpened. She saddled Bristle and rode hard west, dust rising behind her like smoke. The desert stretched wide and wordless. Hours passed. Heat shimmered off the road, and then footprints. fresh horse tracks, cutting through the dry wash. She followed them. By dusk, the trail led her to a canyon split open like an old scar. Below, a small fire burned. Asher sat beside it, hat off, shirt sleeves rolled, hands working a piece of rawhide into a rein. He didn't turn when she dismounted. "You ride quiet," he said. "Almost didn't hear you." "You left a bullet in a church," she said. He nodded. "Felt like the right place for something I won't use again." Rhea stepped closer. "Why go back to Dawson Springs?" His hands stilled. The rawhide slipped from his fingers. "Because the dead don't rest easy when lies keep them company." Her breath hitched. "Then tell me the truth, Asher." He looked up finally. The last of the sun caught his face, the shadows softening everything hard about him. "I was there," he said, "at the ranch, but I didn't pull the trigger." Her pulse stumbled. "Then who did?" He shook his head. "A man named Vance Cordell. Worked for the same boss I did once. Daniel got caught between us when a deal went bad. I tried to stop it. Didn't matter. By the time the smoke cleared, he was gone." Rhea swallowed the ache rising in her throat. "And you ran?" "I ran," he said quietly. "Because they said I did it. And maybe I did, in another way. I brought the storm to his door." Silence fell between them. The fire popped once. She knelt opposite him, the flames painting their faces in amber light. "I came here to kill you," she said. "Now I don't know what to do." "Then don't decide tonight." He reached into his coat, pulled something out, a small folded handkerchief, her brother's initials stitched in blue. Rhea froze. "Where did you—" "Found it near the body," he said softly. "Kept it because I didn't want it lost in the dust. Guess I thought someday I'd find someone who'd care to take it back." Her fingers trembled as she took it. The cloth was stiff, worn, but real. When she looked up, his eyes were steady again. Whatever wall she'd built around her grief cracked just enough for light to slip through. The wind shifted. The canyon whispered. He broke the silence first. "You can stay here till morning. The desert rides hard after dark." "I'll stay," she said. He nodded once, then fed another branch to the fire. They sat in quiet, the kind that didn't hurt. Somewhere far off, a coyote called, and the sound drifted like a prayer unanswered. Rhea touched the handkerchief to her lips, not to kiss it, but to breathe it in, dust, smoke, and memory. And in that moment, she realized that vengeance wasn't the only thing that bound her to this man, something older, something unnamed. If this story has touched something gentle inside you, stay close. The fire's still warm, and the night hasn't told its whole truth yet. The desert night hummed with silence. Wind curled through the canyon, carrying the scent of rain long gone and mesquite still smoldering. Rhea lay by the dying fire, staring at the stars. They looked too close, too sharp, as if heaven itself was holding its breath. Asher sat a few feet away, his back to a boulder, hat low over his eyes. He hadn't spoken in an hour, but the quiet between them didn't feel empty. She wanted to hate him for that, for the calm, for the way his presence softened the edges of everything she had sworn to keep hard. Her fingers brushed the handkerchief in her pocket. Daniel's. A proof that Asher had been there, proof that maybe, just maybe, he'd told the truth. Still, truth had never been simple in the West. It came dusted in guilt and carried by men who bled like saints but lied like outlaws. "Why'd you come back?" she asked finally, her voice barely more than wind. He didn't move. "You mean to Dawson Springs?" "I mean anywhere near me." The fire cracked. Sparks floated up like gold ghosts. He took off his hat, set it beside him, and ran a hand through his hair. "Because sometimes a man gets tired of being the story other people tell. I thought if I faced the one person who had the right to hate me, maybe I'd stop running from the sound of my own name." Rhea turned toward him. "And what if I still hate you?" He met her gaze. "Then I'd know I earned it honest." The simplicity of that answer cut deeper than any apology. She looked away, out toward the dark ridge line. "Vance Cordell, you said he's the one who—" "He's still breathing," Asher said. "If that's what you're asking," her heartbeat sharpened, "then he'll pay. You plan to shoot him. I plan to make sure he doesn't hurt another soul." He sighed, slow. "Revenge burns clean at first, then it starts feeding on the one who lit it." "Don't preach to me," she snapped. "You don't get to warn me about fire when you carry smoke on your skin." His jaw tightened, but his eyes stayed soft. "You're right, I don't, but I've seen what comes after. It's never peace, Rhea, just quieter ghosts." The sound of her name in his mouth made her chest ache. It shouldn't have felt that way. "I can't forgive," she said. "I ain't asking you to." He rose, stretching the stiffness from his shoulders. "We'll ride at first light. I'll take you to Cordell. You can finish what you came here for." She blinked, surprised. "Why would you help me?" "Because I owe the dead," he said simply. "And because if you're gonna aim that gun, you deserve to know who you're shooting." He turned away, feeding the fire again. His hands were rough, sure, the kind of hands that had built and broken in equal measure. Rhea watched him in the flickering glow. There was no bravado in him, just weariness that looked too old for his face. She wanted to ask him what kind of man he'd been before the world made him run. Instead, she asked, "Do you believe people can change?" He looked up at the stars. "I believe the land does. After a storm, even the desert grows green for a while. Maybe folks are the same." She didn't reply. The answer settled deep inside her, warm and unwanted. When the fire burned low, he laid his coat beside her. "Cold drops fast after midnight." "You'll need it," she said. "I've got thicker skin than sense." He gave her a half-smile, quick, almost shy, and then lay down a short distance away. She wrapped the coat around herself. It smelled of rain, horse, and a faint trace of smoke. The scent of the road, the scent of him. Sleep came slow. When she finally drifted, she dreamed of thunder. But it wasn't the sky breaking open. It was hooves, dozens of them, pounding across hard ground. She woke to shouting. "Asher!" He was already up, gun drawn, scanning the ridge. In the grey light of dawn, silhouettes moved above them. 3, maybe 4 riders. "Bounty men," he said. "Cordell's dogs." "How did they find us?" "Same way vultures find what's dying." He grabbed her arm. "Get to the horse." Bullets ripped the air. Stone shattered beside her. Rhea ducked behind a boulder, heart hammering. Asher fired once, clean, measured. A cry echoed from above. "Go!" he shouted. She ran to bristle, untied the reins with shaking hands. The mare reared, frightened by the gunfire. "Asher!" she yelled. He was still behind cover, reloading. The ridge flared with muzzle flash. "Ride south," he called. "Don't look back. I'm not leaving you." He met her eyes across the chaos, something fierce and unspoken passing between them. Then he shouted, "It ain't about leaving, it's about surviving what comes next." Another shot rang out. He staggered but didn't fall. Rhea froze. The world narrowed to that single heartbeat. "Asher!" He waved her off, voice hoarse but firm. "Go, Rhea!" And somehow she obeyed. The horse lunged forward, the canyon falling away behind her. Wind tore at her hair. The world blurred. She didn't know if he was alive or dying. She only knew that every mile between them felt like betrayal. The vow she had carried for vengeance had changed shape. It was no longer hate that drove her. It was fear of losing the man she was never meant to care for. If this story has left you breathless under the same western sky, don't ride off just yet. The trail ahead darkens, and the heart never rides alone. The sun rose hard and merciless, burning the night's mercy clean away. By the time Rhea slowed Bristle near the wash, her throat was dry, her thoughts louder than the desert wind. She had run. Left him behind. The sound of gunfire still echoed in her chest. She pulled the reins, heart pounding against the silence. The mare's sides heaved, nostrils flaring, but there was no sign of pursuit. No riders, no dust, no more thunder of hooves. The world was still, too still. Rhea slid off the saddle and stood in the rising heat. She could have kept riding, could have told herself that Asher Holt was another ghost of the West, one more man lost to his own sins. But she couldn't make her feet move. Somewhere between hate and forgiveness, something fragile had begun to grow, and she couldn't leave it buried. She turned the mare around. "Easy, girl," she whispered, stroking Bristle's neck. "We're going back." The horse snorted, uncertain, then obeyed. And together they rode back toward the canyon, toward smoke, danger, and something that felt too close to hope. By the time she reached the ridge again, the fire was cold. 2 bodies lay in the dirt. Neither of them was Asher. Her knees weakened, relief and terror tangling together. She searched the ground, the drag of boots, drops of blood, a trail cutting south through the brush. He was alive. Wounded, maybe, but alive. Rhea followed the tracks. The sun climbed higher, pressing heat against her shoulders. Every step was a prayer she didn't believe she deserved to say. She found him an hour later, slumped against a fallen tree, hat lost, shirt dark with blood near the shoulder. His revolver lay in the dust beside him, empty. But his eyes opened the moment she knelt beside him. "Took you long enough," he murmured. Rhea swallowed hard. "You're bleeding." He gave a weak grin. "It's the West. Everything bleeds a little." "Don't talk," she said. "You'll waste strength." "Talking's never been my strength." She tore a strip from her shawl and pressed it to his wound. He hissed softly, but didn't pull away. The heat of his skin burned through her fingers. "You shouldn't have come back," he said. "I couldn't leave you." His gaze met hers, tired but steady. "You don't owe me anything." "Maybe not, but I don't like owing ghosts either." The air between them stilled. For a moment, the only sound was her heartbeat echoing in the quiet. She finished tying the cloth tight, her hands trembling. "Who were they?" "Cordell's men," he said. "Guess word got out I was still breathing." "And Cordell himself?" He shook his head. "He'll come. He always does. Men like him can't stand being left unfinished." Rhea sat back on her heels. "Then we'll finish it first." He blinked, surprised. "We? You think I'm letting you ride into this alone after saving my life twice?" He smiled faintly. "Didn't realize we were keeping count." "I am," she said softly. "And you're ahead." He looked at her for a long time. There was no jest in his eyes now, only something raw, something unguarded. "You remind me of the rain," he said finally, "hard when it falls, gentle when it stays." Rhea felt her breath catch. She wanted to turn away, to shield herself from the weight of that kindness, but couldn't. "Don't say things like that," she whispered. "Why not?" "Because I don't know what to do with them." He smiled again, barely there. "Just keep 'em somewhere warm." She tore her gaze away, scanning the horizon. "We need to move. If Cordell's close, he'll find us anyway. Then let him find us on our terms." He tried to stand. Pain flashed across his face, and she caught him before he fell. His weight folded against her, solid and heavy and trembling. Her arms fit around him too easily. The smell of sweat, dust and smoke filled her lungs, and she felt something inside her shift again, something she couldn't name. "Easy," she said. "Lean on me." He chuckled, breathless. "You planning to carry me across the desert, Rhea Calder?" "If I have to." "You'd burn out before sundown." "Then I'll burn," she said. The words slipped out before she could stop them, and when she looked up, his eyes told her he'd heard every bit of truth in them. He didn't answer, didn't need to. The silence that followed said more than speech ever could. Together they made their way down the slope toward the lowlands, a hidden arroyo with a trickle of water and enough shade for the both of them. She helped him settle against the rock, then poured water from her flask, pressing it to his lips. He drank slow, eyes half closed. When he spoke again, his voice was low, the kind meant for dusk and quiet hearts. "If I don't make it." "Don't," she said sharply. "You're not dying on me." His hand lifted, brushed her wrist. "If I don't make it," he said again, "don't let hate live in you after I'm gone. It's heavier than you think." Her throat tightened. "You think I don't know that?" "I think you know too well." He let his hand fall back to his chest, the faintest smile ghosting over his mouth. "But you carry light too. I can see it." Rhea wanted to argue, to tell him he didn't know her, but instead she whispered, "Rest. We'll talk when the sun sets." He nodded once, eyes closing. The desert hummed around them, alive and still. She watched him breathe, the rise and fall of his chest, the small wince each time. And in that fragile quiet, she realized something she hadn't dared before. That love could come softly, even through dust and blood, that healing could grow in the same soil as vengeance. When the wind shifted, she heard hooves again, far off, faint, but coming closer. She reached for her revolver. Her hand shook, not from fear, but from what she was willing to lose. If this story has found a place beneath your skin, stay close. The night is gathering, and hearts like theirs don't rest easy beneath a western sky. Clouds moved in quick, ashamed steps across the sky. By late afternoon, the sun had gone thin. The desert smelled of turned earth. Even the birds moved low, as if they, too, were avoiding something coming. Rhea kept watch while he slept. She had tied his ragged shirt with care. She had cleaned the wound as best she could. Every time he breathed, she counted the rhythm like a prayer. Her hands had not stopped shaking since they found him. Her mind would not stop making lists of what could go wrong, what usually did. The hoofbeats came first as a distant drumbeat, then closer. Not many riders. 2, then 3. Voices a shade too loud for a country that knew how to hold its secrets. The arroyo gave them cover at first. Then light hit metal in the distance, and the world changed to a line of men moving like a slow machine, practiced in violence. Rhea slid Bristle out of the shade and tied her to a mesquite, then crept back to where Asher lay. He was awake now, eyes half open, his mouth curved with that tired humor that hated being pitied. "They found you," she said. He turned his head. Pain creased the edge of his face. "They always do, eventually." She wanted to say so many things. She wanted to tell him he could sleep, that she would hunt every man down by dusk if she had to. She wanted to laugh at him for being stubborn and brave and foolish all at the same time. Instead, she reached for his hand and held it like it was the only steady thing left. The men moved into view like a herd. 3 riders in rough coats. One had a face like old leather, and the other 2 looked younger and angrier. The older man wore a belt with a big brass buckle and a scar that ran from cheek to jaw. He had the look of someone who kept lists and enjoyed checking names off. Rhea stood. Her boots sank into soft sand. She could have gone for her gun. She could have slid a bullet into the sun and watched it find them. Instead, she walked forward under the hot sky and stopped so the men could see her face. "You lost?" the scarred man called. "We're just passing through," she answered. Her voice did not shake. The desert had taught her to make thin words into armor. "You got a friend down there," the man said, eyes flicking toward where Asher lay. "He got a price on his head." Rhea felt something pull inside her chest like a wire. "He's hurt," she said. "So are a lot of men," the man said. "That don't make them saints." He spat. Dust spat back. One of the younger riders dismounted. He was the same age as the boy in Gallow Ridge. He had the look of someone who had seen too many doors close on him. He sauntered over to Asher and reached down as if to check the wound. His hand hovered, indecisive. Asher opened his eyes and looked at the man. The wound pulsed. He drew breath and spoke. "You here for Cordell?" he asked. The scarred man's lip twitched. "Cordell's got men in half the towns this side of the river. We got our orders. Orders made of paper and curses. Orders that turned human flesh into numbers." Rhea's jaw tightened. She had learned to despise paperwork as much as she despised pistols. "Take him if you want," she said, voice thin as a wire stretched over a canyon. "But he's hurt. He'll die slow and ugly in your hands." That made the scarred man laugh. A sharp sound. "You got guts, girl," he said. "Or you got a foolish heart. Either way, you're owed nothing." Rhea's hand went to her side. Her fingers closed on cold metal. Her throat tightened. Her breath was a steady drum. Asher's eyes met hers. The light had left them, and something fierce lived there now. He tried to lift his hand. She squeezed tighter. "Don't," she said. He understood. He didn't push. The younger man bent and slipped a thin rope beneath Asher's shoulders. He hauled gently like a man unwilling to wake a sleeping animal. The scarred man spent a long moment watching Rhea. Some men loved the power of watching others decide their fate. "Cordell wants him alive," the scarred man said finally. "Says he's one of the loose tongues. We'll take him to the river crossing and hand him over. The man's got a price, and payment's proper." Rhea felt the world go small and then bitter. "You can't," she said. "You don't know what he did." "We know enough," the scarred man said. "You got any sense of mercy? You'll walk away and forget this whole mess." Rhea laughed low. It was a sound like gravel. "Mercy's for folks who ask for it." They began to lift Asher, two on one side and the rope across their shoulders. He made no protest. His face was pale and set. When they moved, he stumbled. Rhea wanted to shove them, to drive a knife into the space between their ribs and take him away. She stood still. She had no gunshot for cowardice, but she did have a thing sharper than courage. She had a choice, one that had nothing to do with bullets or law. She stepped forward and put one foot between the men and Asher. "If you take him," she said, "you take me with him." The scarred man blinked. "You don't seem to understand how much Cordell pays." "And you don't understand how much I'm willing to lose," she said. A hush fell like a blanket. The horses shifted. The younger riders glanced at each other, uncertain. The scarred man took a slow breath. He studied her the length of a prayer, and then laughed again, but not as sure. "You got spirit," he said. Rhea's pulse hammered. "Names," the scarred man demanded. She told him. She gave her name like a dare. He spat again and said his. Then he wanted to know how much she knew about Cordell. Rhea measured her words like a farmer measures out seed. She gave him just enough to make him hungry for more, and not enough to satisfy. When the men finally moved, they did not take Asher straight to Cordell. They led them toward a low ridge, a place where the road cut into rock. Rhea kept her hand on Asher's. He squeezed it back, a weak, private reassurance. They reached the ridge, and the scarred man stopped. He looked at her with a coldness that said he intended to do what the world with its crooked rules allowed him. "Last chance, girl," he said. "Walk away." She felt something in her chest give way, small and terrible and bright. "I don't walk from what I started," she said. The younger men readied to ride on. The scarred man barked an order. Metal flashed. Hands reached for reins. At that moment, a sound came from up the road. A single horse coming hard, with a rider hunched like a storm. The dust kicked up and painted the world in a brown haze. The scarred man turned and cursed. Rhea's heart thudded. A new voice cut through the heat. Words she did not expect to hear. "What you boys thinking?" the rider called as he approached, voice edged with iron and something like pity. It was a stranger. A man in a grey coat, a badge glinting on his hip. A marshal. The riders looked at the marshal and then at one another. The scarred man ground his teeth. Orders changed when the law stood in a field. "Marshal's been asking about a group like you," the man in the grey coat said. Cordell don't appreciate men who take liberties. You move, you answer to me." The scarred man spat again and muttered that the marshal didn't have jurisdiction. The marshal smiled like that didn't mean anything. For a breath, the world tilted. Men reconsidered their chances. The scarred man weighed coin against consequence. Rhea watched Asher. He turned his head, eyes tired but fierce, and for a moment looked like someone who would stand in the middle of a gale and not break. The scarred man snarled, then spat and jerked his head. "Take the girl. Leave the outlaw. Cordell will want his hands on her anyway." Someone swore. The younger men moved as if to obey. Rhea's mouth went dry. She had fought for her right to hate, to aim, to finish a vow. Now she was offered another bargain, another test. Asher shifted beneath the rope and turned his head enough to whisper 3 words she could not hear at first. She leaned closer, because hearing him had become its own religion. But then he said it clear as a bell, soft and raw. "Run, girl. Live." It landed inside her like an accusation. She wanted to obey. She wanted to sprint into the dust and never look back. She wanted to save him and kill him and keep him all at once. The marshal watched them with a face that had seen too much to care for riddles. Rhea looked at Asher. He had asked her to leave. He had asked her to live. He had asked her to grant herself the mercy he would not take. In the pause before men make final choices, everything is louder. She could hear her own blood. She could hear the distant wind through the arroyo. She could hear the faint beat of hope like a moth against a lantern. She made a choice, but not the one he asked. "I don't run from the things that matter," she said. Her voice was small and iron bell clear at once. The younger men flinched. The scarred man laughed and barked an order. The world moved. They did not take her. They took Asher. They marched him away like a prize. He looked back once. His eyes met hers. He held her for a breath that felt like a confession, and then he was gone, swallowed by riders and dust. Rhea stood alone as the arroyo held its breath. The marshal stayed. He watched her with a look that could be kind or could be duty. He tipped his hat and said he'd do what he could. She sank to her knees in hot sand. The sun burned at the edges of the world. Her hands turned to fists. Her chest ached with a hurt so large it felt like the desert itself. Cordell had him now. The ride to the river crossing was a line drawn in the dirt, and at one end stood a man who had all the coins and none of the mercy. Rhea clung to one truth. She had chosen. She had not run. She rose. Dust clung to her skirts. The road led both away and toward. If this story has kept a quiet ember in your chest, come close. The storm is not finished. The next ride will ask for everything. The night wind carried voices from the river, men shouting, horses restless, metal striking metal. Rhea watched from the ridge, crouched low behind a cluster of yucca. Below her, the river glimmered faint and pale under a bruised moon. Campfires burned like wounds in the dark. Cordell's men, at least 8 of them. And in the center, bound to a post by both wrists, Asher Holt. He was on his knees, head bowed. The lamplight caught the blood dried along his jaw. Even beaten, he looked like a man who'd refused to kneel for anyone until now. Rhea's fingers curled around her revolver. Empty. Still empty. She hadn't found bullets since Gallow Ridge. But maybe she didn't need any. Maybe vengeance had stopped being about killing the man who'd taken her brother and become about saving the one who'd tried to make peace with his own ghosts. She could almost hear Daniel's voice. "You always led with your heart, Rhea." She wanted to say that this time was different, but the truth was, it wasn't. She was still that girl who couldn't stand to watch someone good get swallowed by bad men. The river whispered. The fire cracked. Cordell himself stepped into the light. He looked nothing like she'd imagined. Younger. Clean. His coat black and pressed, his hat lined with silver braid. His smile was thin, polite, and colder than the water running behind him. "Well now," Cordell said, crouching in front of Asher, "didn't expect you'd come crawling back, Holt." Asher's voice came low. "Didn't. You sent dogs." Cordell's smile didn't falter. "Still got that tongue, I see. Shame. It's the one part of you I don't need." Laughter rippled through the camp. Rhea felt her stomach twist. "You think you can talk your way out?" Cordell said. "No. Tonight's about setting records straight. You left me holding a debt. You ran with my coin and my name on your back. Now you'll make it right." Asher lifted his head. "You don't know what right means." "Right," Cordell said, straightening, "is whatever keeps me breathing and my men loyal. You were neither." He drew his revolver, spinning the cylinder slow, like a man enjoying the sound of control. Rhea's pulse stuttered. She could rush in now, try to stop it. But 8 men, 1 empty gun. No light but the fire. She'd die before she got close, and Asher, he'd watch it happen. She forced herself to wait, to think. She scanned the camp. 3 horses were tied near the water. 2 rifles leaned against a crate. Her eyes caught something else. One of the younger men, sitting apart, cleaning his boots, a bottle beside him. The same boy from Gallow Ridge. Her breath caught. He'd run once. He might run again. Quiet as dusk, she slipped down the slope, moving through brush and shadow until she was close enough to whisper his name. "Eli." He flinched, spinning. "What the—" "Keep your voice down," she hissed. He squinted at her. You shouldn't be here." "They'll kill him." Eli looked toward the fire. His face twitched. "That ain't my problem." "It will be," she said, "if you watch a man die for something he didn't do." He swallowed hard. "Cordell says—" "Cordell lies," she cut in. "You know it. You've seen it. You left Gallow Ridge because you couldn't stand it. You want to prove you're better. Help me." He stared at her, bottle shaking slightly in his hand. Then, with a quiet curse, he nodded. "What do you need?" "Fire," she said. "And noise." He frowned. "Noise?" "Big enough to wake hell." Minutes later, the camp turned to chaos. Eli had kicked one of the oil lamps into the wagon wheel. Flames leapt fast, hungry. Men shouted, grabbing buckets, boots, rifles. Rhea moved through the smoke, her revolver drawn though it held nothing but faith. She reached Asher's post, heart in her throat. He looked up through the firelight, disbelief flashing to recognition. "Rhea!" "Don't talk." She cut the rope with his own knife, hands burning on the rough hemp. He fell forward, catching himself with a groan. "I told you to run," he said. "I don't listen well." "I've noticed." "Can you walk?" Not fast? Then crawl. She hooked his arm over her shoulder. Together they stumbled toward the horses. Smoke bit at her eyes. Men shouted behind them. Gunfire cracked. Eli appeared through the haze, waving them toward the river bank. Go! They reached the nearest horse, Cordell's own, still saddled. Asher grimaced as she helped him mount. Then he reached down, pulling her up in front of him. You sure about this? He said. Too late to be sure. He kicked the horse hard. It lunged forward, hooves thundering through the shallow water. Bullets hissed past, sparks flying off stone. Rhea ducked low against him, his arms locked around her, solid even through pain. They rode until the gunfire faded and only the wind chased them. When they finally stopped, miles upriver, dawn was bleeding over the horizon. Rhea slid off first, legs trembling. Asher stayed astride a moment longer before sliding down, wincing. She turned to him. You shouldn't have spoken like that to Cordell. He'll come harder now. He smiled faintly. He was coming anyway. Rhea stepped closer, touching his face gently. You're bleeding again. He caught her wrist before she could pull away. You risked everything back there. Why? She hesitated. Because I can't lose another man to that kind of darkness. His eyes softened. You didn't. She looked at him, really looked, past the blood, the dirt, the tired smile, and something in her chest broke open. He leaned in, slow, like a man still unsure he had the right. Their foreheads touched first, then the world fell quiet. His mouth brushed hers, tentative, grateful, alive. The kiss tasted of smoke and dust, and something she hadn't felt since before death found her family, something that might one day be peace. When he pulled back, his voice was a whisper against her skin. You should have left me. I tried, she said. Didn't take. He laughed softly, then winced. She smiled through tears. Come on. Let's find somewhere safe before you fall over. He nodded, still holding her hand. The river ran beside them, silver and endless. And for the first time in years, Rhea felt like it was carrying her towards something instead of away. If this story has left you holding your breath under the dawn, stay close. The past rides faster than any horse, and the next sunrise will bring its reckoning. The sun climbed slow through a thin veil of clouds, spreading light over the canyon's bones. Rhea and Asher rode until the horse could no longer bear the weight of both. They stopped in a dry hollow where a spring whispered faintly from the rocks. Rhea helped him down. He staggered, then leaned against her until the trembling in his legs passed. His face was pale beneath the dust, but his eyes were clear again, tired, still alive. You keep saving me, he said quietly. That's a bad habit to start. Then stop giving me reasons, she answered, trying to sound steady. He almost smiled, then winced, pressing a hand to his ribs. You sure you're not running from something yourself? Maybe I am, she said. But for once, it isn't the truth. They found a half-collapsed line shack nearby. 4 walls, a roof mostly whole, a cot that smelled of old sweat and cedar. Rhea swept dust from the floor while Asher built a small fire in the stove. The crack of flame filled the silence like forgiveness. When the warmth reached them, she sat across from him, legs folded, hands around a tin cup. Cordell will come, she said. He won't stop after what happened at the river. I know, He'll kill you. Asher looked up, his eyes dark and steady. He's tried before. That's not courage, Asher. That's suicide. He tilted his head, studying her. You sound like someone who's been left behind too many times. Her throat tightened. Maybe I have. He said nothing. Just let the quiet settle, heavy but not cruel. When he spoke again, his voice was low. You said your brother's name once. Daniel. He died because of what Cordell started. Rhea nodded slowly. Daniel was everything I wasn't. Steady, kind, careful. He believed people could be better. I didn't. Not until... She stopped herself. Until? Asher asked gently. Until you, she said. He looked away then, jaw working like he wanted to speak but couldn't. I ain't better, Rhea. Just different kind of broken. Then maybe that's enough, she said. The fire cracked softly. The wind outside had grown gentle, brushing dust against the walls like a heartbeat. For a long while, they didn't speak. Rhea watched his face in the firelight, the rough edges, the scar beneath his ear, the lines that told stories he'd never say aloud. There was no armor left in him, no lie, no performance. And she realized that somewhere between vengeance and mercy she had found something worth saving. Let me see your shoulder, she said. He hesitated, then unbuttoned his torn shirt. The wound was red and raw but clean. She tore a fresh strip from her sleeve and dipped it in warm water. Her hands shook only once, when her fingers brushed his skin. He watched her without a word, eyes tracing her face like he was memorizing it. You're gentle, he said softly. Don't mistake that for mercy. He smiled. Wouldn't dare. She wrapped the bandage tight, leaned back on her heels, and exhaled. There, you'll live. You sound disappointed. I might be. They both laughed, quiet, breathless, like people who'd forgotten how. Then the laughter faded, and the silence turned softer, the kind that carried weight. He reached out, slow, fingertips grazing her cheek. You don't have to stay. I know. Then why do you? Because I've been alone too long, she whispered. And because every time I leave, I feel like I'm still chasing the wrong ghost. He let his hand fall. And now? Now I'm not sure who the ghost is anymore. For a moment, neither moved. The air thickened between them, heat and breath, sorrow and something that felt like hope. He leaned forward, slow, as if asking a question she could still refuse. She didn't. Their lips met again, this time without fear. No rush, no need, just two wounded souls finding the middle ground between pain and peace. When they parted, her forehead rested against his. The fire popped, throwing sparks across the floor. What happens when Cordell finds us? She whispered. He smiled faintly. Then we stop running. You mean we fight? I mean we end it, he said. Later, when he finally slept, she sat by the doorway, watching the stars through a crack in the roof. The sky stretched wide, silent and endless. She thought of Daniel, his laugh, his quiet faith. She thought of the bullet Asher had left in the church, of the note that said, "For faith." Maybe this was what he'd meant. Not forgiveness, not escape, just the courage to stay when everything inside her wanted to flee. A sound drifted from the distance. Hooves again, but slower this time. One rider, maybe 2. She reached for the revolver out of habit, though she still had no bullets. Asher stirred behind her, his voice gravel-soft. "They're coming, aren't they?" "Yes." He sat up, grimacing. "Then Dawn's coming with them." Rhea looked back at him, his face half in shadow, half in firelight. "You ready?" He gave her that same crooked smile she'd learned to trust. Always was. Outside, the wind shifted. Far off, a coyote howled. The night held its breath. Rhea's fingers brushed the empty gun. Her heart didn't feel empty at all. If this story has stirred something quiet and fierce in you, stay near. The next sunrise will burn away every lie, and love will have to choose whether it stands or falls. Dawn rose hard and cold over the line shack. The air carried that dry stillness before the first gunshot, the kind that makes even the wind hold its tongue. Rhea stood by the doorway, watching the horizon blush with light. Her revolver hung at her side, still empty, still faithful. Behind her, Asher moved slow but sure, fastening his holster with one hand. The colour had returned to his face, though the lines of pain had deepened around his eyes. "You should take the horse," he said. She turned. "No. You're faster alone." "So's dying," she said. He smiled faintly. "You're stubborn as dry grass in a lightning storm." "And you talk too much for a man about to be hunted." That earned a rough laugh, small but real. The sound wrapped around her like a promise. They didn't need to say who was coming. Cordell. The name carried enough weight to make the air taste like iron. Asher buckled his belt, checked the rifle, the one he'd taken from Cordell's camp. He looked like a man who had stopped running long before this morning and now only waited for the storm to catch up. "You ever kill a man?" he asked suddenly. Rhea met his gaze. "I came close once. The night Daniel died. I wanted to kill every shadow that looked like his killer." "And now?" She hesitated. "Now I just want the noise to stop." He nodded, as if that was an answer he understood too well. The first rider appeared when the sun broke the ridge, a dark speck moving against the light. Then another, then 6 more. Cordell always came with an audience. They rode down slow, confident, dust rising around them like ghosts called to watch. Rhea stood beside Asher in the open doorway. The air inside the shack felt tight, too small for what waited beyond it. Cordell's voice carried before his face did. "Thought you'd run farther, Holt," he called. Asher stepped out, rifle lowered but ready. "Didn't figure I needed to. The devil usually finds his own way home." Laughter broke from the men behind Cordell, sharp, cruel, and empty. Cordell dismounted, brushing dust from his coat as if the land itself offended him. "You made a mess back at the river," he said. "Cost me men." "Cost me coin." Asher's tone stayed quiet. "You got both to spare." "I don't have patience to spare." Cordell's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Where's the girl?" Rhea stepped out before Asher could stop her. "Right here." Cordell's smile sharpened. "Well now, you're a brave little ghost, aren't you? I heard about you. The sister with a pistol and no aim." Rhea's jaw tightened. "Maybe my aim's better now." He glanced at her weapon and laughed. "That gun's as empty as your threats." She didn't move. "Then step closer and find out." Cordell tilted his head, amused. "You know what I like about this desert. It doesn't judge. Bury a lie deep enough, and the sand will call it truth." Asher said, Then you've buried a lifetime. The smile faded from Cordell's mouth. You think you can make me confess, Holt? You're a ghost who's forgotten he's dead. Asher lifted the rifle. Maybe, but even ghosts leave teeth marks. Cordell's hand went to his gun. The air shattered. The first shot came from one of Cordell's men, wild, high, ricocheting off the shack wall. The echo split the morning in half. Rhea dropped low, grabbing Asher's arm. He fired once, clean, precise, and one rider fell. Another screamed. Dust exploded around them. Bullets tore through the dry air, biting into wood and rock. "Inside!" Asher shouted. They dove back into the shack. The window burst apart behind them. Rhea grabbed a second rifle from the corner, the one she'd found under the cot. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of knowing this moment would end one way only. Asher crouched beside her, reloading. Blood seeped through his bandage again. "Can you shoot?" he asked. "I can try." "Then try." She aimed through the crack in the wall and fired. The recoil nearly knocked her backward, but she saw one man fall, another shout, another shot. The world became thunder and smoke. When the sound faded for half a breath, Asher spoke, voice ragged but steady. "If we don't make it—" "Don't," she said. He caught her gaze. "You need to know. I didn't stay in Gallow Ridge for the money, Rhea. I stayed because I saw you that night by the graveyard, before you knew my name." Her breath hitched. "You remember that?" "I never forgot." A bullet slammed into the doorframe, splintering wood. She flinched, heart pounding. "Tell me later," she said. "When we're alive." He almost smiled. "I'll hold you to that." Another shot came, this one close enough that the wind of it brushed her cheek. She turned her head, ready to fire again, when she saw movement beyond the smoke. Cordell, walking forward, calm, untouched, revolver in hand. Rhea froze. Asher stepped in front of her. The gunfire stopped. Even the wind paused. Cordell's voice came soft, smooth. "You think she'll save you, Holt?" "You can't wash blood with more blood." Asher's voice was barely above a whisper. "No, but maybe you can end it with truth." Cordell raised his gun. Rhea screamed, "Asher!" The shot cracked the air. But it wasn't Cordell's gun that fired. Eli, the boy from Gallow Ridge, riding hard out of nowhere, smoke still curling from his barrel. Cordell staggered, a look of shock crossing his perfect smile. His gun fell from his hand. He dropped to his knees, blood blooming dark across his coat. The silence that followed felt heavy, sacred. Cordell's men fled, spooked by a world suddenly without their master. Eli reined in his horse, eyes wide, breathing hard. "Figured you two might need help." Rhea couldn't move. Asher lowered his rifle slowly. "Guess the boy learned what side he's on," Asher murmured. Rhea's knees gave out, and he caught her, pulling her close. The smell of gunpowder and dust filled her lungs. "It's over," she whispered. Asher looked at the fallen man, then back at her. "No, Rhea. It's just quiet now. That's all peace ever is." She buried her face against his chest, letting the tears come. The sun rose higher, washing the land in gold. Later, when the fire had burned down to ash and the bodies were just shapes in the distance, Rhea and Asher stood at the riverbank. The water moved slow, steady, clean. He tossed his revolver in first. It hit the surface, sank without a sound. "You sure?" she asked. He nodded. "I'm done carrying what's already buried." She reached into her coat and pulled out Daniel's handkerchief. She held it in her hands for a long moment, then let it fall into the water beside the gun. It drifted away, soft as forgiveness. Asher looked at her, eyes warm, voice quiet. "What now?" Rhea smiled faintly. "Maybe we find out who we are without ghosts." He stepped closer, brushing her hair from her face. "You ready for that?" She nodded. "If you're beside me." He kissed her then, slow and sure. The river caught the light. The desert held its breath. For the first time in years, Rhea Calder didn't think of revenge. She thought of roots, the kind that grow even in hard ground. If this story has settled deep in your chest like the first peace after storm, stay close. The final chapter waits at the edge of dawn, where love must decide whether it can truly begin. Morning rose quiet and golden, soft as the first breath after a long fever. The storm had passed. The land looked washed clean, every stone, every thorn, every scar glinting beneath the new sun like something forgiven. Rhea woke to the hush of water. The river moved slow beside the camp, its rhythm matching her heartbeat. Asher sat nearby, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, bandage fresh, steam from the tin cup curling around his hands. He looked different now. Not unbroken. No, the break was still there. But honest. Like the man had finally stopped running from his own shadow. "You're quiet this morning," she said. He smiled without turning. "Feels wrong to talk over peace." She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and joined him by the water. "Peace," she said, tasting the word. "I almost forgot what that feels like." "You don't forget," he murmured. "You just forget you deserve it." She watched the light climb the canyon wall. The birds were back, timid, as if testing the air. The fire from last night had burned itself out, leaving only smoke and the faint smell of cedar. "Eli rode off before sunrise," Asher said. "Said he'd take word to the marshal. Let them find what's left of Cordell's men." Rhea nodded. "He's got a chance to start over." "So do we," Asher said. She looked at him, studying the lines on his face. "Do we?" He met her gaze. "If we choose to." They packed slow, like people who didn't quite trust the quiet yet. Rhea saddled Bristle, while Asher checked the last of the supplies. The world had gone still enough to hear their breath. Before they left, she walked back to the river's edge and knelt, fingers trailing in the cold water. She could still see where Daniel's handkerchief had drifted away the day before, a flash of white carried toward the far bend. She whispered, "You can rest now, Danny. I found what needed finding." The water caught her voice and took it, soft and sure. When she rose, Asher was behind her, watching. "Do you think they forgive us?" she asked. He thought for a moment. Maybe forgiveness isn't something they give. Maybe it's what we learn to give ourselves. She turned toward him, sunlight catching the faint silver in his eyes. "You sound like a preacher." He chuckled. "A bad one." "You're better than you think," she said. He stepped closer, brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek. His fingers lingered a heartbeat longer than necessary. "You heading east?" "I was," she said, "but I'm not sure anymore." "West's emptier." I've had my fill of empty. He nodded, thoughtful. Then maybe north. Town called Red Hollow. Folks there could use steady hands. Yours or mine? Both, if you're asking. She smiled. A real one, small but sure. Then north. They rode slow, the kind of slow that lets the world catch up with you. By midday, the river curved away behind them, and the land opened wide, rolling grass, scattered wildflowers, the faint outline of mountains far beyond. Rhea breathed it in, the scent of sage, sunlight, and the ghost of rain. Every mile felt lighter than the last. She could still feel Daniel beside her, not as a wound anymore, but as a whisper that said, "Live." Asher rode beside her in silence. Once their hands brushed on the reins. Neither pulled away. He said, "You still thinking about him?" "Always," she said, "but it doesn't hurt like before." "That's what healing is," he said. "Pain that learns how to breathe." She looked at him then. This outlaw with his quiet heart, this man who'd taught her that not all scars mean ruin, and she knew this wasn't the end of her story. It was just the first part that didn't begin in loss. By sundown, they reached the high ridge overlooking the valley. Below them lay a stretch of land, green and golden, a few ranch houses scattered along the river's edge. Smoke rose from one chimney. The sight looked almost unreal, like a dream that hadn't realized it was allowed to exist. Rhea exhaled, slow and deep. "It's beautiful." Asher watched her instead of the valley. So's peace, when it finally shows its face. She turned to him, eyes soft. "You ever think we deserved this?" He shrugged. "Maybe not, but the land doesn't ask for proof. It just keeps blooming." Rhea smiled, tears stinging but welcome. "Then we stay." He nodded. "We stay." The night came gentle. They built a small fire again, not for warmth, but for memory. Asher strummed a few quiet notes on a battered guitar he'd carried since before Gallow Ridge. The sound floated into the dark, thin and tender. Rhea leaned against him, head on his shoulder. The stars returned, the same ones that had watched every wound and every vow, only now they didn't seem so far away. She whispered, "When I first saw you, I thought you were the man who ruined my life." He smiled. "And now?" She lifted her head, eyes meeting his. "Now I think you might have saved it." He didn't answer with words. He kissed her, slow, certain, full of everything the desert had tried to burn out of them. The fire cracked, the horses shifted, and the world turned quietly toward tomorrow. At dawn she woke to light spilling across his face. He was still asleep, breath even, the lines of pain softened. She watched him for a long time, then whispered, "We made it." Outside, the wind moved through the grass, gentle, endless, alive. Somewhere far behind them, the past had finally stopped calling. If this story has touched a tender place in your heart, let your light stay with us. Comment, share, and subscribe so this Western fire keeps burning for you.